and it's there. Oh, here we go. All right. Hey, Gundam Maniacs. Welcome to the Gundam Explained show. I am your host, Adam Blue, and joining me, as always, is Steven from Midnight Hatter. Steven, how's it going? I'm doing good, but you know what? I think I realized I didn't add your audio. So, guys, crazy thing that happened. Actually, I could do the program I use, and we've had this issue before, to it's hard to think and talk at the same time. So pardon me. There we
Well,
go.
thankfully, they're the customer service department at Wirecast is so responsive to everything that you send them. So I'm sure that immediately after the stream, you're going to get an email from them that says, "Hey, Adam, I'm sorry that we ruined the Gundam
Yes.
Explained show, but
No, you're
we'll
right.
fix that in the next patch."
And it even looks like the audio is coming in good. So guys, this is what happened. As soon as I was about to start the show, I noticed no audio. I couldn't preview the audio, and I'm like, that's weird. And then Steven joined, and I couldn't hear him either. And I'm like, oh no, don't tell me. So I loaded up OBS, quickly rebuilt all the scenes, and I guess now it's working. So we can just get on with the show. I'm happy. And then yeah, like you said, Wirecast is pretty cool. I can get with them and be like, what did I do this time? But no, really, we have a good show today, and it's funny because if you watched Hatter's show from yesterday, and if you haven't, go check it out after this. Awesome show yesterday, by the way. That's got to be in my top 2 coolest live streams I've ever done. I don't even know what the other one would be. I'm just saying that, but
right, you got to pick like an arbitrary number between 1 and 5.
yeah.
Like it's in my top.
No, it was awesome because like I felt like it's therapeutic in a way. Got to talk about deep things you don't normally talk to people about, and kind of getting it out there for other people. It was pretty cool. But
and I'm embarrassed because I should have worn this shirt yesterday because you were rocking the dad shirt. You had the world's greatest dad mug. I'm like, oh man,
I did not
totally
even
wasted
realize
opportunity.
that. That's so funny you brought that up because I love that shirt. It's cool that it says Dad. My youngest bought it for me, but it's just like it's super comfortable. He got it, I think, at Gap, and I don't know what it is about the cloth, how it feels. It's just comfortable. But
Yeah,
that's cool you brought it
novelty
up. But
shirts
anyway,
always are. It's
yeah,
like
no,
this one my wife got me for Father's Day. So
Bluey, yeah, Bluey's a big deal. No, but no. At the end of the show, I remember you asked yesterday. You were like, "So, any preview of what we're going to be talking about?" And I was like, you know what? Game preservation is a big topic that's been coming up lately. So I think we can talk about that. And then just this morning, we hear Gundam Evolution is getting shut down. And I think that is timely. Let's see. Sorry, I was looking. Something that says video resolution is not supported, but no one's complaining. So anyway,
see what happens.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. No, but anyway, so yeah, Gundam Evolution. We'll get into that as well, because that got shut down. We're getting shut down. I gotta say, personally, I'm not surprised, but you know,
to me, esports like as a whole genre kind of feels like a big Ponzi scheme. Like it's, is anyone actually making money in esports?
It's like NFTs.
It's
just buzzwords that everyone's like, oh. But real quick, good to see Return to Nerd in the chat. Goose, Sway, Travis Wadlow, Nike. Let's see, Brian Zanichelli, good to see you. Matt Mad Dog Wheaton, Rogue New Type, Shy Guy. Let's see, I don't want to miss anyone else. Dan Vince, Quarter Gameplays, Ian Armad, Talos. Awesome, we got
the full mod squad in the house.
That's awesome. No, so real quick, what I like to start with is like any Gundam related stuff that we happen to have gotten into this week. Hatter, I don't know if there's anything you can bring up other than your gummies, like those little, what I like to call little gummies.
Yeah, I mean, I share almost all the Gundam stuff I do on Wednesdays. So if you guys didn't catch yesterday's show, we've got some chunky Gundam minis that I 3D printed that I'm very excited about. So
chunked them, right? Isn't that what you?
Yeah, exactly. Chunked them.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. I love those, and that's really just seeing that is what's getting me to want to get a resin printer, because I was
Oh,
holding
yeah.
off that for a while, but I think that kind of sealed the deal. Yeah,
I
so
think
check that
resin
out.
is ideal for like minis, and then like the filament printers are great for like cosplay applications.
Yeah, no, exactly. But no, so like if anyone's interested in any of that stuff, join Steven's channel or Patreon. The link's below, because that's how you can actually get access to this stuff. Which it's awesome.
Yeah, I try to make as much of it available as I can. So
No, yeah, that is really cool. No, but no, another thing is, oh, sure, lad, good to see you. No, another thing that some Gundam stuff I got into this week. It was a heavier week than before. One is I finished building. Not only did it come in the mail, but I finished building the GM Spartan, and
very nice.
yeah, love it. I can't wait to top coat it as soon as it's not 100 degrees and 90% humidity. I'll get to that, because it's like everything I like about a mobile suit. You know, as much as I like the Gundam with the V fin, when it doesn't have a V fin, it's a little more realistic, I guess, when it comes to a mobile suit. And yeah, that GM
Sure.
Spartan just hits all the marks. Another thing was the where it's this White Dingo, Robot Spirits White Dingo GM Sniper 2. You know, I did that recent review on Rise from the Ashes. It was like my first Gundam game, one of my favorite Dreamcast games. And so then that got me to want to, you know, it's cool when I've decided to scale back on what I'm buying to then find the specific thing that I guess speaks more to me. So it's like getting these White Dingo Gundams. But what's interesting about this is there was a error they made on the original Robot Spirits. It was a P Bandai, and it was the torso. The part underneath was actually supposed to be blue instead of white. Um,
Oh,
so then what they did was, for anyone that bought it, they just sent them another one. So when I went to go buy the used one online from Japan, it just comes with the other body, so you technically get two. And
very
what's
nice.
what's really cool is I have a Robot Spirits Ground Gundam that has the rocket that is canon with what this uses in UC. So and actually this is how I use this mobile suit in GBO2, because it's a sniper, and I'm not big on sniping. It's
Yeah,
fun,
I
but it's
think even. Oh, go ahead.
no, I was gonna say it's one of those things where it's like it's slower paced combat, you know, and the game's already slow to begin with, so sniping is slow. So I just throw on the rocket or the plasma. So I kind of made my little GBO2 representation of it. So what were you gonna
Yeah,
say?
sure. No, I would say even in the game Rise from the Ashes, the sniper rifle is not the optimal loadout.
Yeah.
You almost prefer to use like the beam rifle or the machine gun. I think I went with the machine gun.
Yeah, exactly. Like, yeah, the beam rifle, the machine gun. Yeah, yeah, exactly. And then when you beat the game, I like that it then allows you to use other weapons. So, um, I learned from GBO2 is this early like prototype beam rifle that has a shot that takes off like 75% health, and it's actually from Rise from the Ashes. When you beat the game, you can use it, and it's interesting because I did my review on Rise of the Ashes, and something I didn't mention because I didn't really get to it until later was when you play through it again with the weapons unlocked, it's actually a lot of fun to be that powerful, because then you can kind of
Yeah.
skate around and like take out Zaku a little easier. So yeah, yeah, really cool. Another thing that I got was this vinyl of Zeta Gundam. It's the collection volume 2. So it has more of that, like the Titans theme. It has that like more disco-y song that I really like. But I do want
Nice.
to get them all. So I I found an awesome eBay listing that had like 3 Gundam vinyls for like $50. So, and one of them was volume 1. So you know, that's an interesting thing when it comes to vinyls, because growing up, my parents did have vinyl and a record player, but as soon as like cassettes were a thing, as soon as CDs were a thing, I mean, that's mainly what we had. But there's something too. I've spent most of my adult life streaming music, so that like to take some music you really like and then take your time to put it on a player, and then have that fill the room. There's something more to the music, like a more of an appreciative thing. Do you have any experience with vinyl?
Yeah, yeah. Actually, when I was in college, a couple of my roommates were very big into DJing, and
Oh,
they had like their plastic milk crates full of vinyls that, obviously it's not the same as, putting on like an old record that you have some kind of appreciation
right.
for. But they were scratching and all that good stuff, and so that was cool. And you kind of mentioned that when cassettes and CDs became the sort of status quo, it's like, um, you had people fall into one of two camps. You either had like the Luddites that kind of said, no, no, never, nothing's ever going to change the sound quality and everything that you get from vinyl, the tactile sensation that you have, just laying the record on the turntable and setting everything up. And then you had people that are like, no, get rid of it, give me my 8 track, give me my my
Oh
cassette
yeah,
tapes. Um, so,
yeah,
it's interesting the different perspectives, but I think that, there's a younger generation that's growing an appreciation for vinyl now.
yeah. It's something I don't know. I almost can relate it to like if there's a certain meal you like and you're preparing it yourself rather than getting it from fast food. I feel like there's a similar feeling I have when it comes to if it's music I really want to jam with in the moment. Putting it on the record player feels different than me going to Spotify and hitting play. And I don't know. I don't know if it's possible that could someone ruin music for themselves because of streaming? I feel like I will listen to the first 5 seconds of a song and be like, nope, next. Nope,
Mm,
next. Like
That's a
on
that's
the
a very good point.
yeah,
I mean,
no, go ahead.
well, it's like when you lay a record down, there's a committed action there.
Yeah.
There's something you have to do in order to engage in that activity. Most people don't put on a record and then like hop on their computer and start working. They'll sit down and kind of just enjoy the sound and truly listen to the music, as opposed to, like you said, with all of the music streaming software out there, you could just hit play and then go to work or go play a video game. It's kind of like the same thing that you and I talk about when it comes to watching anime, where,
Oh
a lot of the
yeah.
modern generation, when it comes to watching old anime, they just throw it on in the background and, they're on their phone or messing around with stuff. They're not really committed to watching the program that
Yeah,
they've put
especially
on.
when then they can just binge the next episode, and it goes by in such a flash. Like I don't think that you can really take in all the nuance or think about it. So I think there's some relation to that when it comes to how we consume food, music, even games. I know with Game Pass, I'll scroll through, okay, what's even my Steam library? I'll scroll through the 400 plus games I have on Steam and be like, what am I going to play? Nah, nah, nah. And I'll install something, play it for a second, be like, nah. Like,
Yeah,
yeah.
and I mean that's something that you know, when you actually have the action of taking a disc or a cartridge and putting it in a console, there's something that's more engaging about that than just going through your digital library. And I can't describe how many times I've been just kind of cruising the PlayStation store looking for some free game to throw on because I'm just bored with everything that's already in the library.
Yeah, that's actually a good point because there's something I think is different with like music and games is I feel like music doesn't necessarily age bad like games do. Because sometimes I feel like games are only as good as the time they're in, not all the time. But in terms of like any game, it's because like w- this is what we've achieved as in game mechanics. But then like 5 years later, it could be that there's a completely different game mechanic that then really dates the older ones. And then it's like, oh, I wouldn't play a game because of this. Now there's these quality of life improvements. Whereas music, it's more of the sound of the engineering that has, and a lot of times that's part of the uniqueness. And
Yeah.
because I think back to like when I sold my entire physical video game collection. I was like, that's a lot to have. I had from ColecoVision up into modern stuff, and I but I see what you mean. Like, I love the feeling of plugging in a cartridge into the Sega Genesis, but also with emulators, and we're going to get into a bunch of this here soon. So this is a great segue, by the way. Good job. The, the, there is some setup to that too. There is time it takes sometimes to get your emulator set up so you can play. It's really not as easy as you search for the game you want to play and then you start playing it.
Yeah.
So
Maybe it should be.
yeah, I don't know. Yeah, this is going to be a good conversation. And I wonder if we should actually get into it because I think that's all when it comes to what I got into Gundam wise this week. I was actually building the Toads Ritter when the Spartan came in, and then I just like put the Toads Ritter aside and just built.
See, what you should have done is post the meme of like Andy dropping Woody and doing the whole like I don't want to play with you anymore.
And it's funny because I was reflecting on that moment, thinking how like the Toads Ritter to me is a different type of what I love about a mobile suit than the GM Spartan. The GM Spartan embodies what I like about sci-fi and like fictional military operations. The Toads Ritter to me is representative of like how badass mobile suits get in the Gundam universe without what like having that cooler, edgier design, but without being too far out there for the sake of it. Like I think we see sometimes.
I mean, it's not a super robot. It doesn't have like glowing bits or like beam shields or things like that. It's still
It uses
grounded
incoms
to a
too.
degree, but
Yeah, it still uses the incom, so it's not a Saikamu necessarily. It's more of the wire guided system, which I like that because I remember seeing that in Gundam being like, why are things on wires in space? But it's like that is kind of a neat idea of showing limitations that still exist in technology.
yeah.
So yeah, no, but yeah, let's jump into this next topic. So I think I'll start with Gundam Evolution because this could lead into the preservation aspect. So if you haven't heard, yesterday Bandai announced Gundam Evolution is going to be end of life at the end of the year. There's still a couple like season updates coming out with mobile suits and maps. There was a screenshot that was posted somewhere with like this Gundam Evolution banner, and it showed a Camphor and Zeta. So I don't know if that means those are what the next suits are going to be. I don't know if anyone's heard that or I'm saying too much. I don't know, but
That's a shame if they're mobile suit right as they're about to nix the whole thing.
and so just the thing was Gundam Evolution was just not that popular, but they were also trying to make the esports happen. So I will actually give it to Bandai for someone's saying something about the stream buffering. Hold on one second. Let me see if I could. I wonder if I can change something here real quick without killing everything. Okay. Well, I guess I'm sorry, guys, if that happens. Luckily, that was just that one time. I see what it is now. I have the stream outputting at 4K.
Oh my goodness.
But I don't think it's going to display at 4K. So, but anyway, no, with Gundam Evolution, like it's cool that Bandai tried this, in the first place, a hero shooter and esports. That's what they were doing. They're like, they have all these different Gundam games, but they're like, hey, let's try to inject Gundam into what the most popular mainstream aspect of gaming is right now.
Mm-hmm.
Although that is not necessarily the case. I think it's just the loudest because it's mainly teenagers when it comes to the competitive esport nature.
Right.
That's what you hear online a lot, but it's just because they are the loudest. But to me personally, the game is fun and it's tight. It's like, it's good gameplay, but it's not what I want out of a video game at all, really. It's purely...
Well, and you and I talked about this when Gundam Evolution and Gundam Battle Alliance were announced. There's something out there for everybody.
Yeah. That's and that's I guess the bottom line, which is awesome, is at least Bandai is trying these things out. And then what's also interesting is with something like GBO2, and someone brought this up on my Discord, and I kind of felt for them for a second there because they were like, GBO2 is just a little too hard for me. Not I don't think they were saying hard for me. It's more of there's so many systems that the game doesn't necessarily explain them that well. And so sometimes it is hard to understand what you're doing. And that's the thing. I think that is what makes everyone different, because for me as a gamer that's been gaming forever and I love gaming, that's what I like out of games, when they're very intricate and there's a lot you have to spend your time with, where some people don't have time for that. Sometimes people only have time to jump into a quick first-person shooter.
Yeah. And
And
that's where those types of quality of life improvements that you mentioned kind of come into play, where it's like, we have these understandings about first person shooters, even going back as far as GoldenEye days, where now we know that left stick is always move and right
oh,
stick is always look, and you have the left trigger to do your focused aim and all of that stuff. So it's like we have these kind of what would you
like
call them?
built-in, but preconceived. I don't know. There's a word for that.
Yeah, yeah, conventions, I think
Yeah.
would be the way to describe them.
Okay.
It's like we have
Yeah.
these conventional control schemes that make it easy to hop into these games and engage with them, maybe not necessarily at a pro level, but at least competently.
So, like, yeah, I agree, and I do think though, then alongside GBO2, there always should be another shooty action Gundam game that's just more general mainstream. And you know, but I think and we've talked about this. I think even on the marketing episode or a few episodes ago, there's a lot about Gundam Evolution I think is very odd about it. And one is Gundam is known for its story. Gundam Evolution wasn't a story-based game. Yes, it was supposed to be mainly competitive, but a lot of times these competitive games come from a place where, since it's not based on story, it's here's just, how the game works. Whereas Gundam has this rich history of story. By injecting that into a game, you're going to have kind of this wider interest from all different sides, from people that are into the story of Gundam or people that want to learn about the story of Gundam. Gundam Evolution didn't do any of that. Let's say it had animation
Right.
cutscenes that it unlocked every few seasons that were based on here's what happens when these mobile suits collide from different universes, almost like SD Gundam Battle Alliance did. It had a story of why these different mobile suits were actually interacting with each other.
Or the Dynasty Warriors Gundam
Oh yeah,
series did the same
that's
thing.
right.
They created this narrative that allowed the different interactions between these characters from various universes. So it's
Yeah,
interesting that, I mean, even Overwatch, the game that
yeah,
Gundam Evolution is loosely based on, has a rich lore and history around it.
that's right. Yeah, that's you know what, and that's a good point because yeah, even though Overwatch was made as a game first, they still had a rich story to it to attach you to the characters. Gundam Evolution didn't have that. It would be based on the shows they had, but that wasn't part of the game. Um, yeah, it's very interesting. It's sad to see the game go. Even though it's not for me, but like I hope then they do come out with another sort of actiony, generic actiony game for everyone to play. Just make it like I hate to say Call of Duty, more like Battlefield. Really, just make a game like Battlefield where it's just all these different GM loadouts you have, and then there could be the hero units. Where it could be 16 on 16 point capping. It reminds me of. Did you see that Battle Bit game on Steam? So
No, I haven't.
I want to say it's a 128 player game. It's literally Battlefield, but with Roblox graphics, and it's been taken off. It's
There
it's
you go.
no season pass, no microtransactions. It's strictly a Battlefield clone, but with um, uh, yeah, Roblox graphics, so that they can make tight gunplay controls. And
See,
I
and
think
you brought up the real point about Gundam Evolution going away, is that now no one is going to be able to play it.
yeah,
It is, because it is a server-based multiplayer game. There's no campaign mode associated with it. You can have it installed on your console or on your PC, but
Yeah.
you're never going to be able to play it again.
So this will get into the game preservation. And so to start with that, I'm glad you were starting with this because there is precedence for dead multiplayer games to be revived by a community. And I was trying to do it,
True.
this I wasn't intending to talk about this today, but since it came up, I figured, you know what, that's part of preservation in a way. And so I was just looking up a couple multiplayer games that, because of the strong fan base that already existed, there was enough people to actually bring them back from the dead on their own. Um, One is a Disney game called Toontown that started in 2003. I never played this. Have you heard of it?
I remember the ads for Toontown.
Okay. It and it got shut down in 2013, but there were so many people that liked it that someone was able to create their own servers. I guess with any game on PC, you can eventually unpack the data and then manipulate it for your own use. Right? Is that inevitable from your understanding?
I feel like it. I mean,
Okay.
but that kind of begs the question. If there's so much fan support around these older multiplayer games that they're willing to create these, self-hosted servers to preserve these games, where was that support when the game was live?
Well, what is interesting about this though is this was done by fans and not the developers, not the publisher.
Yeah.
And so what I think is happening here is that's how the game is popular enough where there are smart enough people out there to do that. And I think that's telling. Like Gundam Evolution, is it going to be missed and popular enough by some pretty ingenious coders or programmers that they're going to create their own servers, unpack the game, be able to host it themselves?
Right. I think it largely depends on the talent of the fan base, um, more than the popularity of the game.
Yeah.
Because obviously, you might have a game that has 1 million players, but nobody knows how to rip the game and host their own server. Or you might have a game with 10,000 players where there's just one guy that happens to be a developer in his free time that is going to do that.
And
Because, like I said, if Gundam Evolution, for instance, is going to be such a popular game that people are going to want to create their own fan servers, it makes you wonder why the game went away in the first place.
yeah, no, that's exactly it. And I think and that goes into emulation. I'm going to get to that in a second. There were some other
Oh yeah.
games that I looked up that are the case. There's a Warhammer game called Age of Reckoning. I never played it, but apparently that got shut down. But I guess people were able to open up servers to keep that going. And I don't know if this is accurate, but it sounds like even World of Warcraft, don't they have it where there's previous versions that people host or have put servers together? Does that
I
sound
honestly don't know enough about
okay?
World of Warcraft to answer that competently.
Okay, yeah, that's something I think I've heard. There's another game I've never
I'll
heard of
believe
called
it.
Fusion Fall, where that was a game that got shut down, but then there were multiple versions that people actually um, created on their own and then hosted. So I feel like, and this is going to get into the emulation thing. I feel like if there's enough people interested in something, they will do it themselves, and you almost would rather want that than the corporation. And this actually gets into the next topic, and it is game preservation in general when it comes to um, old games coming back out. So, like,
Yeah.
what's funny with Nintendo is like the next, and I think they even started this with Super Nintendo. They would re-release the game sometimes with updated graphics, and then as they went, they would just like with the Wii, the Wii U, and the Switch, they would on their eShops have the games available again. Now that just means you're rebuying it, even if you already owned it, and I guess you're just paying for the license to continue to play it on modern hardware, which is one way to go about it. You would think though, if this was
Yeah.
released on PC, like if the original Mario was released on PC, you'd still be able to play it until today.
This is
But
true.
that's where Nintendo kind of then can take advantage, and I guess take advantage is a strong word, but of a market and continue to get money by having a closed platform that, the modern games can only be there. So what will happen then is if someone wants to play an old game that is no longer in print, you would have to buy it used, which means the original publisher is not going to make any money off that. They're not going to see a dime. It's not
Right.
going to matter. Um, or and if it's a rare game, it might be too expensive for someone to buy, or just not available to buy. So the other
Yeah.
option would be to emulate. So technically, and I don't know if illegal is the word to use, but it's technically against TOS to play emulated games. But in as far as I know, and I did a little bit of research, I could be wrong, there's never been a history of a video game publisher taking a gamer to court because they were playing an emulated game. And if that were
Yeah.
to happen, I believe that would then put laws in place that would probably protect any out of print game that doesn't have a modern version available to be able to be played, as long as it's not being distributed. That I think that's the other aspect, depending on how it's being distributed.
Well, and that's the tough thing about a legal battle is, and you get into this whenever you have lawsuits about um, tortious interference with contracts and things like that. Damages for maybe missed opportunities due to defamation or something like that. You have to prove the monetary loss from the action of the opposing
Yeah.
party. So in this case, Nintendo would have to prove that there was money on the table that this emulator took out of their pockets. So if there was an emulator for Tears of the Kingdom, that is a very obvious, yes, you are absolutely stealing money from us. But an emulator for, one of these retro games that you're talking about that's been out of print for so long, I don't think that they're going to be able to prove that somebody is losing money because of emulating Super Dodgeball.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. And then I wonder too, let's say someone is emulating Super Mario RPG. Nintendo has announced a new version coming out, but it's redone, different graphics.
Right.
So then I wonder if there was, and this is why I don't think people are being left and right sued for playing emulators, because
Exactly.
if they were to be tried for that, there would be a very strong defense against that. And this is almost, and I don't want to dive too much into this, but this is almost related to that FTC Xbox Activision thing, because people are, the FTC and the CMA or whatever keep fighting back on Microsoft, but it's not because they don't want it to happen. It's because they have to defend the consumer by continuing to poke and prod wherever they can until they're like, okay, this is really airtight and there's nothing wrong with what's going on. And I think
Yep.
that is what would happen in the case of game emulation if there was a point where someone got in trouble for playing, distributing, etc., an old game. A game that always comes to mind is like Quackshot on the Sega Genesis. Amazing game. Love that game. There's no way you can play it modern unless you um, uh, buy an old copy or emulate it.
Right.
If someone was to get sued for that or taken to court, Sega or whoever would own that anymore, which, that brings up another thing, because some things sometimes no one owns anymore because they're like licensed properties. Like, what precedent is there? And there's like none. And I think that's why nothing has really happened, because at the end of the day, it's not hurting the company enough for them to spend the money to go to court and have that out there in the open for everyone.
Now, here's the ultimate money-making strategy if you're a savvy audience member, is what you should do is go out into the middle of that landfill where they buried all of the copies of ET
E.T.
for Atari, dig all of those up and list them on eBay so that you can then sue anybody who's emulating that game, because then you'll be able to say, look, I'm selling copies of this game. Therefore, they are taking money out of my pocket. It is hurting my bottom line.
And then they would say, well, who are you to actually own that original game? You know what I mean? Because then that's what's so great about this, is because the logic at the end of the day, these are safeguards. I think those terms of service are safeguards for
Right.
And it's very interesting because you brought up Tears of the Kingdom, and right now you can play that on a PC in 4K 60 FPS, which the Switch doesn't even allow. And that's funny
Right.
because I wonder if, I wonder if someone was that and that's the thing. Like right now, you can play pretty much any Switch game that comes out on an emulator. And
Yeah.
Nintendo, I think Nintendo tries to fight it, but there must be something where maybe the loss is not hard to document, or because they make so much money anyway. Like, isn't Zelda the
Yeah.
top selling physical game of this year?
I think so.
Eh,
And I mean, it's kind of ironic that there are so many like Ocarina of Time emulators that are better than the Ocarina of Time emulator that's available on the Switch
that's right.
as part of the
Yeah.
Nintendo 64 expansion.
So that is a great point, because I wonder if it ever got into the nitty gritty where someone's emulating the N64 version to be as accurate as possible. Even though there's a one available right now, but the one that's available is not accurate. There's some missing textures, or I think the textures are incorrect or something like that.
Hmm.
Um, and then I wonder if someone's like, well, this is but I wonder if then they would have to come to an agreement where it's like, okay, you can emulate as long as you can prove you own the modern version that is available. Like,
Right.
I've been doing that with Switch games. I'll buy them, but then emulate them, and because like that Bowser's Fury, even though that looks good on Switch, actually, Nintendo does a good job with those types of games.
Yeah.
Um, oh yeah, the Dynasty Warriors like Zelda games. What
Oh yeah, the well,
Calamity
what was
War?
it
I think
called?
was the most recent one, or something like that.
Yeah.
It runs
Hyrule
horrible.
Warriors.
It runs horrible on a Switch. It's a nightmare. Like, I can't play that. But
Yeah, I mean, the hardware isn't designed to have that many characters rendered on screen at a single
yep,
time. I mean, you even notice that when playing Tears of the Kingdom,
yeah.
one of the glitches that's very popular for speedrunners is by overloading the game by
Oh,
generating too much water on screen.
yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, and so that's where I think if there was a case, the right thing to do would be, as long as you own Nintendo's official copy that you can get, it's fine to then emulate. Like, it's almost like things should be about the license to have it, and maybe have it where Sega has a back catalog of their Genesis games. The licenses are $5 each. You just have a now this again. This actually gets into another point. I was about to say Sega could have this online database where you have a username. It could show every game you own so you can play them. But do we want corporations to be in charge of the preservation of games? And I'd say no.
Yeah. No, I would be opposed to that as well, especially when you're talking about like a registration database and
Yeah.
people knowing what you own and what you don't own. I think that that's very risky territory.
Yeah, and the other thing that goes about it too is, at the end of the day, the bottom line of any corporation is going to be what makes them money, and it's not going to be in their best interest to support playing these old games. Like, there's companies that do a good job. Like Sega, I remember during the Xbox and 360 era would release like a Genesis collection. The Sonic Origins game that came out last year. This year they had the DLC that I bought right away, and it's all the Game Gear games. To me,
That's awesome.
I'm willing to pay for that instead of setting up an emulator, because what we were talking about earlier, when you set up an emulator, sometimes there's some hoops you have to jump through. The average person might not necessarily understand how to do all that. It does take some research. Um, and
Which makes it even more disappointing that a company like Nintendo, with all of the resources that they have, didn't have all of the emulated copies of these N64 games like ready to go, like turnkey. You know what I mean? You have to be, if you're willing to pay for an emulated service, then I feel like you should be entitled to probably the most user-friendly, optimized version of that. If you're willing to go out of your way and tweak all of the bugs and fix all of the textures and things, then by all means,
yeah,
like it's your time. How much money is your time worth?
Yeah, that's right. And I think then I will, conversely give Microsoft the thumbs up because even though they've even proved with data that they don't make money off of backwards compatible games, that no one plays them, and that's not true that no one does, but there's not a market for it. They still tried their hardest to get as many as they can to work. And
Yeah.
some of them they were able to have on their digital store. Some of them it's like, well, we can only get the disc version to work, but it will work. And that's awesome because I kept my Xbox to be able to play some games. One was the Revenge of the Sith game on Xbox. It was really good. And
Yeah, that game is awesome.
yeah, and they recently, and it might have been a year ago, it was one of the most recent updates where the disc version works on an Xbox One. And I think that is awesome that they did that because, again, this is Microsoft showing, and so that's where then almost this Activision thing's good because Microsoft is good at preservation on a level where you right now you don't have to worry about anything. Like just recently they turned on the servers for all the old COD games and even updated where there were cheat hackers in some of the servers and they were able to fix that. Like that's pretty cool. And they're going to release all the Activision games on Steam, like Diablo 4. If it's not already on Steam, it's going to be on Steam. World of Warcraft is going to be on Steam. So it's interesting that Microsoft, and it reminds me of when the original DOS came out. Microsoft made it to where it would run on any computer instead of specific computers. So,
Yeah. I mean, to them, it's probably like a loss leader. You know, they treat it as it's a small investment and they're not going to make any money off of it, but hopefully they kind of coax that customer loyalty and will get them to buy newer titles and or maybe just lock them into, a software model that, you're not even going to be able to go and get Sony products or.
no, that's actually a good point. It almost goes into our marketing show from last week because you almost want to invest into the goodwill of the organization to get people to want to be part of your software programs or whatever. And I think doing stuff like making old titles available is one way to go about it. Um, yeah, it's very interesting. And just, when it comes to Gundam games specifically, I know I got Operation Troy, which was an Xbox 360 game only released in Japan. That was during, I believe, the 1 Year War. Again, you're where you're on the ground. It's like you're a soldier, but you get fighting first person. Mobile suits drop down. The emulation isn't fully there because sometimes, depending on where you look, the screen will turn black for a second. And it didn't age too well. But it's neat that I can go and try that out just for my curiosity. I would love to beat it someday, and maybe someday they can tweak and figure out the emulation. I know. So PS3 is another example because um, PS3 had a lot of Gundam games that were only released in Japan, although there's a history of that. And I
Right.
would buy them and then emulate them. So I bought Unicorn. And I guess technically, since it's out of print, I don't have to buy it. But part of my enjoyment of Gundam is like collecting stuff. So I bought the Unicorn game on PS3, and I was playing it on the PS3 a little bit, but emulating it, I can upres the graphics and everything. And that's really great to do. I can, modify certain components of it. And that's another thing. I went back like G Savior. I would have never played that game if it wasn't for the emulator, so I could try it out. And then I loved it. I went through it.
Right.
Not that that's going to make them money if I was like, okay, I'm going to buy it now, but it's it keeps me engaged with the Gundam IP, so I am buying modern Gundam stuff that's coming out. So
That's
it
true
kind of goes
too.
back to that marketing. Are there any games
Yeah,
you
I
can
mean,
think of?
would you necessarily have gotten, the White Dingo GM Sniper if you hadn't re-engaged with the Rise from the Ashes game,
Dude,
either directly
good
on
call.
Dreamcast or via emulator? It's like,
Dude, good call. Even in GBO2, I'm making sure I have the gear that the loadout that matches. Yeah, you have a perfect example right there because that's the same thing with the Toadsritter and the Pale Riders. Like I was using them in GBO2, it made me emulate Missing Link to see the story, and then I went and bought the model kits.
Yeah, I mean,
You
I
know?
don't think I would have bought the high grade Gaplant if I hadn't enjoyed playing as the Gaplant in Gundam versus Zeta Gundam so much.
Ah, yeah. So I think, I think that's why we don't see even Bandai really go after people that are emulating these games. I think there's something about that just keeps Gundam top of mind for whoever it is, and but at the same time, I wonder if it's worth it for Bandai to maybe, what if they were to create a a service, a gaming service on PC where you can play the whole back catalog of Gundam games. Uh, you know?
Something like that, or at
Yeah.
the very least, I think that it should probably be standard practice for server-based multiplayer games like GunEvo or GBO2 to open source their server code so
Yeah.
that fans can then continue to engage. Because I mean, one of the great things about PS3 games, PS3 Gundam games in particular, is they operate on a P2P, like a peer-to-peer
Yeah.
multiplayer system.
So we were
So
able to
we're sitting
play.
here
Yeah.
decades later playing Dynasty Warriors Reborn, multiplayer, which is
Yeah.
fantastic.
Not only
You
that,
couldn't
but
do that with GBO.
even in the emulator, you can sign in and have a PSN. It's not the same thing. It's like a place RCPS3 ID, and you can actually connect to people, which is great.
Yeah.
That's a good point. So with GBO2, that's P2P. Does that mean if they were that means that game would never be shut down, basically? They just might stop updating it.
Yeah, and it's there's a whole industry of software as a service, and now you have games as a service as well, and so
Oh yeah.
there's this economic model tied into having these server-based multiplayer games. But I think that if developers were to get away from that and kind of go back to the older way of doing things, not only is it better for the end consumer because then you'll get people that are going to play games that are older that they never would have maybe otherwise, but like you said, for preservation's sake, it's going to make these games last longer in the sort of lexicon of the fan base.
Yeah. No, and Nike's saying, well, the logic is that Bandai Namco wouldn't make money, so of course they wouldn't support these older games. What we can hope is that they re-release these games on newer consoles. But that goes back to what I was just saying about Microsoft, is that they were showing the data that they don't make money off of these backwards compatible games, but it's the goodwill of like having that support there that gets people top of mind. And we were just saying you would then buy a new game or a model kit because of that. It's almost like marketing. It's they might not be making money off of it, but eh, they could look at it as a marketing strategy to keep that top of mind, to keep that words everywhere. You know.
Another great example of this that isn't in gaming is, I mentioned that I've been following Robert Talone on YouTube a lot recently because he does sort of silicone and resin molding for, miniature figures and statues and what have you. And in one video in particular, he made a cast of a Reaper miniature. I think it was like a Warhammer compatible Reaper miniature. And at the end of the video, he went on this sort of rant talking about, you know, because people were saying like, oh, you're ripping off of Reaper, you're stealing their IP, you can't be making copies of this stuff. And he's like, the miniature costs like $3.29. And the silicone, the resin, everything that I did here, my time, he was like, I've probably put over $100 of work into making this resin cast miniature copy of this. He's like, Reaper doesn't care about fans making copies of their product because there's no economic sense in it. It doesn't
Yeah,
it
that's
doesn't
a good point.
do anything for them. What it does do is it creates fan engagement. It's fun. It's
Yeah.
part of the community building. And if you can get people excited about the IP, about the franchise, then they're going to go and they're going to go and buy the official products.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's a little bit of there's a little bit of a there's different circumstances, obviously, in copying miniatures where you have to invest a bunch of physical materials into it. But I think that it's the same concept as far as video games go. It does take time to set up an emulator and to download a ROM and rip the game. It's not like it's not a simple process. And so the person that's investing the time and the money to do that, it's just fan engagement.
Yeah.
Unless they start distributing it like,
Yeah.
mass appeal, then I don't see it really hurting the bottom line of these companies.
No. No, I think that's a good way to kind of tie a bow on this, because I think if you're really interested in playing these older games and you want to emulate because you can't find another way to get them, go ahead and do it. I don't think we should rely on the corporations to be the ones. We shouldn't ask them to do it. That was kind of what was going on in gaming news this past week, was kind of like talking down to, a lot of the media outlets were kind of like calling out game companies for not having legacy titles available. And it's just right now that's not part of their bottom line. That's not going to do anything for them. Now, marketing goodwill, yeah, maybe that will take time for them to learn. But for now, there is nothing wrong, I think, if you want to emulate and play a game that's not available, or emulate and play a game that you might own, but you want to, like with Switch games, be able to output better graphics. I'm telling you, Bowser's Fury at 4K 60 FPS looks amazing. Metroid Dread is another one that looks amazing on PC. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I mean, well, let's end this here. What is maybe a Gundam game you have played or want to play that's not available right now?
Well, I mean, I would love to see, either side stories or 0081 get an upscale. Obviously, you could do that in an emulator, but you know,
I see what you mean, because it's
you
still
know,
it still like stands the test of time. Like it's still a good example of like what a modern Gundam game could be.
yeah, yeah, and I know that there are people in the audience that would probably say Gundam Breaker. They want to see
Oh
Gundam
yeah.
Breaker come back. But what about you? What would you say is a game that you either haven't played or something that you want to see restored?
Yeah, it's interesting because I been playing the Saturn game that's just called Mobile Suit Gundam, and it's the original Gundam made as a side scroller. It looks like late Genesis, or I would say Sega CD or 32X graphics and all that, and the way it looks, and it just reminds me of like that time in gaming. But then it made me think that might be just a specific generation or audience or niche, where other people, the younger generation, would be like, "What is this game? I wouldn't, play." But I feel like making a game like that in modern, like just have a game that is you being Amuro in third person, going through all the main scenarios of the original Gundam. Just make and where it has animated cutscenes. That's the type of
Yeah.
game that I'd want to see.
Or I mean oh man, when you start talking about like the level of narrative control that you have in a game like Gundam versus Zeta Gundam or Giran's Greed, where you can
Oh
change
yeah.
things, like you can make it so that Garma doesn't die in New York. You can tweak things and have these different timeline splits and stuff. That would be a fun thing to explore as well.
Yeah, you know what that so then I wonder, with Evolution shutting down, the Gundam Breaker Mobile shut down, I'm assuming there's gonna be a new, like, builder game coming out because they got the new show.
Hmm.
I'm assuming a game might be coming out soon that coincides with the movie, if we get any news on that. And I wonder if this writer's strike going on, I know there's an actor strike too, but with the writer's strike, I wonder if that kinda, even though they said they already got something written, so I wonder if then it's more producers, at this end. But, like, there's gotta be another Gundam game we're gonna hear about. I know G-Gen Eternal comes out this fall or December.
And
So
one of the cool things about Bandai going so heavily in the Unreal 5 direction is that
oh,
you're going to
yeah.
have so many more asset flips, and it's going to be so much easier for them to crank out Gundam games
That's right.
because, everything is in engine already.
Yeah, that's a good point. So, and, you know, I think I've heard, it might be a rumor, that there were some games that were going to be announced that were delayed. So I wonder if Comic-Con they're gonna announce anything, or later on. I and I wonder how much they relied on Gundam Evolution to fill a gap, or if they already had plans, or what happened with Gundam Evolution made them talk more about plans for future Gundam games. Because I do want. I keep forgetting about Code Fairy because I think, like we talked about last time, they didn't do a good job marketing it. That was a fun game, but I think at that point it's like, okay, it's a little aged in terms of the mission structure and all that. They need to really work on a modernization of a true, like, look at how epic games like Elden Ring are. I'm not a big fan of the Fallen Order, the Jedi games, but those are pretty epic. There needs to be a Gundam equivalent. And that's all it takes, really. I think a lot of times if a game is just, if it's presented in an epic fashion and marketed to death, it's going to do well, even if it's not that good. I think we've seen that a lot recently. So
I don't know what you're talking about.
No. But cool. No, that's going to be it for today's show. That was a lot of fun. I like this deep conversation. Gaming is kind of my thing, and I know a lot of times these shows can be, can kind of lean on the gaming side, but, Gundam has a lot of gaming presence, and, RIP Evolution. So
Yeah. But hey, there's plenty of Gundam games, some abandonware that's out there available for you to play.
Exactly.
These old PS3 classics. Go get them. Go emulate them because they're not making them anymore. So
and you can play them online with people like 0081. I mean, isn't it like 3 or 4 players too? And you can,
I believe it's 3 players that you can do 3-player co-op missions.
Yeah.
So
so that's awesome. And then just to end with this, there's gonna be a bunch of us meeting in Raleigh, North Carolina at the end of the month. So if anyone wants to meet up, just ping me and I'll kind of let you know where we're at. And I think that's it. Steven, you have anything?
No, this was a fun one.
Yeah, it definitely was. Well, then everyone, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Check the links in the description for all the other Gundam stuff we have going on. But have a good day. See you all.